On today's show, we get to know Councillor Tyrone Muller as he joins us to talk about the recent council meeting, events in Ukraine, and the proposed Alberta Provincial Police Service. This is Penhole Talk Radio. And welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us again this week. This week being the first week of the second maskless age of Alberta.
Big news, big step forward. Here we go again.
Yeah, and hopefully here to stay. My name is Brian Constantine. I am here with my co-host, Michael Rowland.
Hello, hello.
And this week we are joined by Councillor Muller.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Now, I guess, let's let people behind the curtains a little bit. We were rerunning this a little bit. I dropped the audio, but I want people to know that, and I flubbed your last name the first time we went around, so I got at least that as a do-over. And we also learned that your last name is pronounced Mueller, even though it looks like it's Muller.
Right. Correct.
And that's to help people pronounce it better. Or
yeah.
What's the
So it's Mueller in the family when you talk to each other. But if I want it spelt properly, I just say Muller. Otherwise, everyone throws an E after the U, right? So
that's the way it's spelled, but it's pronounced with the extra.
Well, because in Germany you have that two little dots over the U, the umlaut. So we don't have that in North America. So we just dropped the two dots when they immigrated in the 50s, I guess it was.
Yeah.
Make it easier for everybody. Yeah, make it easier for everybody. Other people change it to Miller.
Okay.
No, right. So that's the other way you could go with it, but we.
Fortunately, I didn't go that astray. So
no.
All right. So we got Councillor Muller here, and so you are now a two-term Penhole Town Councillor.
Correct. Yes, it's exciting.
And so, fortunately, at the beginning of the last election season, you put out a little bio on yourself, and that helped me because we're not Facebook friends.
Yeah, hopefully you're not slighted by that.
No. There's a lot of councillors I'm not friends with on Facebook. I think we get along cordially, for the most part. But this bio helped me because without being friends personally on Facebook, that prevented me from doing my research.
Correct. Yes.
Facebook stalking.
Yes, I've done that myself a few times. That's how you find out information about people. Go into social media.
Yep.
And so, just going off of that bio, we'll get to know you, and then we'll get into kind of the more dangerous opinion stuff later on. So in your bio, you mentioned that you grew up on a farm out in Bashaw. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's where I was born and raised for 17 years of my life, being quite sheltered, living in a small community. So yeah, it's I guess natural fit for me to find Penhole as my home, right?
Yeah.
I know other people are always so surprised. Why don't you live in Red Deer? And it's sort of like, well, Penhole's a natural fit for me to be in a smaller community that has, where people know each other and you're not just, another face on the street. People actually tend to know you by name here.
Yeah. Were you born in Red Deer then?
No, born in Bashaw.
Oh, really?
Yeah, born in the Bashaw Hospital. I don't know how many years after the hospital closed there, but yeah, 1981, there was still a Bashaw Hospital where babies were being born, and yeah.
There's no hospital there then, right? Is there still some
there's a
healthcare
clinic?
center?
There's a clinic there. The old hospital was converted into a long-term care center. It's funny. I was talking with my brother the other day there, and we're remembering years past, and back in the day, there was 3 or 4 family doctors in that community.
Wow.
Right? And you look fast forward now to 2022 and, you can't get maybe a doctor in smaller communities. Yeah. So what are we doing different, right? It makes you wonder, right, where we're at. But yeah.
I thought that was an answer or a question I knew the answer to, like Bashaw on your birth certificate, eh?
Yeah.
I guess there's fewer and fewer of that kind of.
Yeah, I guess
just given that there's no longer.
There's no longer a hospital there.
Yeah, that's a nice little check mark on the uniqueness of the birth there. So many other people are just gonna be Red Deer, but
true, yeah, or Camrose or Settler.
Yep, I guess around there. So you grew up on a farm. What kind of farm are we talking about?
So yeah, I don't.
Or were you acreage?
I guess you call it acreage, but we had a half a section of land. But farming industry is kind of one of those things, you go big or you go home type thing, right? So my folks figured out quickly that it was better to rent that land out. My dad worked as a laborer / truck delivery fellow for local ready mix and septic tank company that actually is quite well known in central Alberta. They deliver all over the place, providing that product. So you got to see all sorts of the countryside doing that.
But I guess the land around there was all rented out.
Yeah, like I said, it's go big or go home. Everybody out there has
yeah.
multiple sections of land that they're doing cropland on, and cattle industry too is a tough one to get into. So yeah, like you say, more of an acreage hobby farm type.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from BC, and I spent a few of my teen years kind of on acreage, and it became kind of a funny farm because we had everything from chickens, like we're just talking about handfuls of these. Like you had chickens, you had geese, you had turkey, you had a potbelly pig at one time. So I had a nice sampling of it. So I'm really thankful for that kind of element or part of my life. It just kind of introduced me to the country life, though I'm originally from kind of more of the city.
You're not one of those people that sees a cow and goes, "Oh my goodness, there's a cow," and goes and runs it, headed on the side of the road or anything like that.
No. My sister, but she would just do that because she's an animal lover. So, and then and so siblings. How many siblings you got then?
I have two older brothers, definitely much older. One's 11, and the other one's 16 years older than myself.
Okay,
so yeah, it was like almost being an only child, because when I was going into grade 1, the second oldest was in grade 12.
Yeah,
that kind of leaves you out on your own.
Yeah, so yeah, like I said, basically the spoiled young only child, probably in their eyes anyway.
Yeah.
The other interesting element you put into your bio is you mentioned that you got grade 9 conservatory.
I did. Yeah.
So like that's nothing to balk at. Like that's a significant achievement.
I wish I was still at that level.
I know, but like I don't know. Hopefully people understand. Like this isn't just hobby piano playing. Like this is testing. This is
exams,
in-depth theory. This kind of stuff.
It was something that I definitely had a passion for. But
I guess that was the other element. Was this you or was this parents?
No. So growing up in a small town, you were either hockey or basketball, volleyball. I'm not exactly an athletic kind of guy, so piano was my thing to get into, and started I think around age 9 or 10. Did it more just for fun, and then in my teen years I decided, well, maybe I should try and get into the Royal Conservatory, right? So I did a number of years of that, and I almost completed it entirely, but went to university and I was like, okay, I got to focus on what I'm going to make a living at. The piano was, music is a great industry to be in, but it's very competitive. So if you want to pay the bills, unfortunately, I decided to switch over to being an IT guy instead.
That's an incredible achievement, though.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. No, that's like I said, I don't think people should overlook that.
I played sometimes music for church services and things like that a little bit here and there.
Still now, eh?
Still a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then from small town Bashaw, you head out to Calgary. Is that correct? For electrical engineering technologist.
Correct. To the DeVry, the Institute was DeVry Institute of Technology, although then they changed the name to University. And then since, I can't remember what year it was, they actually closed in Calgary. So the campus isn't there anymore.
Yeah. So how does a kid growing up in the middle of nowhere, just west of Bashaw or east of Bashaw, get interested in electrical engineering technology?
It's a strange story, actually. So I thought, because I was good at math, that accounting seemed like a good fit for me, right? You know how you think that. My school counselor, bless her heart, had an idea that maybe that's not a good fit for me. I don't know how she figured that out. So she sent me to a chartered accountant office, and then I got to see how the world works in that office environment, and it's not exciting. No offense to people out there in accounting, but it wasn't for me. So then I was looking at scholarships in the binders at school, and we had a representative from DeVry show up at the school, and he saw me carrying all these binders trying to apply for scholarships, and he's like, "Who is that kid?" Right? So she introduced me to him, and he was just very interested because he figured, okay, this is an ambitious kid, maybe he might be good for the school. So they got me an entrance exam, which apparently did well enough on to earn a scholarship from DeVry, and it knocked off about a third of my tuition.
Nice.
So it was a good fit. Yeah, right. So it was good, and I'm an ambitious person, I guess you could say. So I liked the idea of doing year-round schooling and getting a 4-year program down to 3. Yeah. And they designed their curriculum to be half days. so you could work part-time as well. So I got, my parents weren't exactly, flush with money. So being able to work part-time to pay for school, books and things like that was definitely an advantage for me.
So was there a big culture shift for you going from Bashaw to
I remember
Calgary,
the
or were
first few months I stayed away from the farm entirely because I knew if I went back, I probably would quit school, right? Because it's a huge shock when you're used to having pitch dark, silence, crickets, and then you're going to a city where you hear planes flying over, because I was in the Northeast. You have emergency vehicles going at all nights. You're living, I was living in board and room situations. So there was like 4 other strangers in there and all sorts of different routines and schedules. So it was a huge shock to a farm boy that, lived a very, very protected, I guess. Or very,
no doubt. And that's one, like that's that kind of memory of country living, the silence at night is just, I mean, it's just, I'm sure it'd be shocking to someone who's gone from city to country the same way. Because it's just jarring how quiet it is. When I was out in the country, we lived near a lake, and it was, and so it was within eye shot and walking distance. But it was so quiet at night, you can actually hear the fish splash, jump.
Yeah.
And that's such it's a interesting experience to have the world be that quiet, to hear a distant fish splash.
And I find around here, in urban areas, it's the light noise as well, right? You look up in the sky and it's hard to see anything, and you end up in a rural area like that where you don't have any other lights around, and the sky just looks amazing.
Oh yeah, when they were talking a few months ago when we had some phenomenal northern lights, Penhold, unfortunately, you can't see them because of the light pollution, particularly from red deer. So to our north, we get really bad light pollution. We're too close.
Yeah.
And then again, even in Penhold, you get the light pollution of just having the whole town lit up all the time.
No, you can't. And LED lighting, ironically, is better than the older style, right? It is more directional downwards, but you just can't get away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's modern life now. And so I'm curious. Michael has a technology background. You're a programmer, essentially. Is that how you would describe it?
That's the way I'm trained, yes.
Okay.
As a programmer.
Yeah. What does an electronic engineering technologist do?
So I'm not an electronic engineering technologist. It's funny, right? So when I graduated in 99, that's Y2K era. Right? So I was going to school, and at that time, DeVry was just hopping busy. Kids were getting contracts to go to the US, down to Silicon Valley, to NASA, to all these places.
Oh yeah, that was the tech bubble era.
Right? And everyone was scrambling to get ready for the Y2K crash. Y2K comes and goes, it's a non-event, and the tech market crashes. And so then I was looking for a job when I graduated from university in 2002, and there's just nothing out there. Like there was no headhunters, right? So I was looking for a job of my own. They advertised the schools, having a whole area that helps you find a job. Well, there's no jobs. They can't help you find one, right? So that's how I sort of got into the public sector with the government, and was able to get into, I got into electronics type job, but nothing to do with engineering or technology, right? Where you're actually designing. So the concept is you're the go between the engineering level and the technician level. You understand drawings, you understand schematics, but you also see the operational side and the technology side, and you kind of be the go between to make sure both sides of the house work.
So I guess you know a little bit of kind of the hardware and the software kind of worlds of electronics and building electronics, as it were. Is that correct?
Yeah. Anytime I showed the curriculum to, because a lot of people, didn't know much about DeVry, but you showed them the curriculum, and they were just amazed as to all of the courses that you took to meet that requirement. And I don't do any of the things. Like I remember doing Laplace transforms in digital signal processing. And it was like, it's like you see in the cartoons, right? With the board full of, and I used to do that. There's no way I could ever remember to do that again in my life, probably, but I did it once.
I think in the end we just end up forgetting 90% of the stuff we require over time.
If you don't keep the skills sharp,
especially in the electronics world.
That's probably the biggest thing I learned right after university, is that education is basically a way of proving to the world you can learn to do stuff, but other than that, it doesn't really mean anything. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean you can do a job.
I'm kind of in that same boat. I view the world now as more as before. You had to retain your information. Like if you went to school, if you forgot what you learned, it's not like you can just pull it up on your phone or check out a YouTube video. But now it's all about kind of just information acquisition, or at least, acquiring information. You know where to find it is kind of the idea. You don't have to keep it internalized the whole time.
Some of the basics of it, right? Like the physics courses and, some of the science behind how transistors work, right? It's good theory to have in your mind, but a lot of the technology changes, right? So when you look at some of your textbooks from back in the day, you kind of start laughing, right? Because it's stuff that's no longer relevant. It's been way far replaced, right? Some of the programming level you would know too, right? Like you don't get to that level. There's now other things that have built upon that make life so much easier, right? Who does, web design hard code anymore, right? Like not too many people are going to go to that level.
And then you've got things like languages change dramatically. The use of the languages changes, everything about it, the library packages you're using with your programming are constantly changing. So it's more about learning the basic skill set and then being able to adapt.
Yeah.
And that's really across almost all industries.
Exactly. You don't come out of school and expect to rely on that for the rest of your life. You better be able to learn and adjust and build on yourself.
Yeah. So you take that learning, you go to CFB Suffield.
Yeah, so that was my first taste of working for the public sector, D&D Suffield, and so that's don't know if you're familiar with that particular base.
I looked up a little bit. So
everyone always thinks of like the chemical side of the plant or side of the base there, right, where they're doing investigations into that. I had nothing to do with that. Thankfully, I had no interest in that.
So this is the base just northwest of Medicine Hat.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the base. So that's the side there, the Canadian side. But then there's a British side. And that's the side that I worked on. So the British Army Training Unit Suffield is what it was called, BATIS. So they would do yearly training scenarios in the summertime. You would actually see trains come from Montreal with tanks and all sorts of other armored vehicles from the UK.
Yep.
And then they would do their live exercises on the fields north of Suffield in that area, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the map, there's a huge area, right? That's cordoned off. That's basically no man's land for civilians.
Dead man's land if you go into it.
Right. So my job there, I was an electronic targetry technician was my job title there. Essentially, I was repairing stuff that got shot up, right? Like I kind of laughed. I was like, well, it sounds like really fancy, but it's pretty obvious. There's a hole there. That's probably where I got to fix something. So that was a nature job. Did that for a year. That was my first taste of working for public service. And as a 21-year-old at that time, I found it rather deflating because a lot of people that were there, were either this was their second career after putting in 20 years in the military already or something like that. So there wasn't a lot of motivation, wasn't a lot of energy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I looked at this and went, how can I do this for another 35 years? So I was definitely looking for the other opportunities on the horizon. Yeah. But it was a good start. And I have to say the first few months having tanks rolling by the window and having, military personnel with funny, English accents, some of the colloquialisms they use. Guy came in once, I need the adjustable spanner. Pardon? I need adjustable spanner. And I'm like, okay, well, point at it. What are you looking for? Oh, the crescent wrench. Oh, okay, that's what you need.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a great experience to be there.
Yeah. So as I was doing a little bit of research on Suffield, so it's apparently the largest military training base in Canada, training area in Canada.
Could be. I don't recall that, but I know it was a large area.
Yeah, it's a pretty big area. And apparently the Britain is moving their tank training now from there.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
They're closing at least that element of it.
So I'd have been out of a job anyway if I'd stayed.
Yeah.
there.
So you'd be out of it. So they're moving it over to. I think they got some things going over in Poland and then over in Oman as well, to be a little bit more
cost effective than trying to bring things all the way over here.
So
that's a long way to come.
Still be a little bit more militarily ready for action.
I was baffled when I would see all that stuff come and go by train, and I was just thinking, what are the costs behind that?
I know they're not borrowing Canadian tanks; they're bringing their own stuff over.
It's all their stuff.
That's crazy. To think that, let's go train out in the middle of Alberta, Britain military, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So you move from Suffield, but you stay in kind of the public service and public service area, going with the RCMP. You're RCMP IT analyst.
Yes, my job title is an IT analyst. So I switched to stayed with the federal side with the RCMP and was able to get on to doing computer stuff, oddly enough. So my first job with the RCMP was actually going out in the field to detachments and upgrading the operating systems from Windows 98 to Windows 2000 at that time. And this is 2003, 2004, by the way. So they were a few years behind. And they had, stuff from the mid 90s sitting in their offices, Pentium 2 level computers. And they would say, oh, it runs really slow. And I don't boot it up. It's, Windows 3.1. And I could understand why they needed to get these replaced. So that was a big job, running all over the province to all these attachments, getting new computers and new operating systems, new software.
So it wasn't just, at least initially, you weren't just located in one place, eh?
No, so that's the first 10 years of my career on the federal side was basically running all over the province. So that was desktop support. Then I got into doing some of the, hardware, software recycling, and then the desktop support. And then I got into in-car stuff. So about 2007, 2006, there was a big initiative to get in-car electronic laptops in all police cars. So before that, outside of the major metropolises of Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, City of Red Deer, they were doing things pen and paper. Yeah. Right.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah.
It just seems like
doesn't it seem
like crazy that it's only 15 years ago?
But that was it. And you would show up and, most of these police officers, they go, I don't need that stupid laptop. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 15 years, 20 years. Why I need this? Well, you come back a month later, something wasn't working with the laptop and they're like, the world's come to an end. I need that laptop. I need the maps. I need the query information. I need all that stuff right there because it's so convenient. Right. Yeah, so that was a really cool job where I think it was about 800-ish laptops that we ended up putting out in the field in a 2-year period. Wow. So it was good. Again, I got to see a lot of the province and that, but when I did that for 10 years, I kind of got tired of it. So then an opportunity came up with the City of Red Deer to do IT support for the RCMP in the City of Red Deer. It seemed like a good time to jump ship and get there. So
as far as IT goes now, IT analyst. So are you involved in just kind of making sure their systems run, or are you actually kind of in any kind of investigation form?
I'm not involved in investigations, or I try to stay out of that because I don't want to get called to court. That's not a very good use of an IT guy's time. So I am more of I think to put it, I find efficiencies, right? So you have our CMP organization is large. Yes. So you have, groups that specialize in server support, that do desktop, that do help desk, that do, all these specialties. Well, they're not necessarily the quickest for City of Red Deer RCMP because they have a whole province or a whole country to support. So I'm the local person that can maybe provide some efficiencies. If I have some experience or knowledge, I can get something fixed and running hopefully quicker than they can. And if I can't, then at least I have done some troubleshooting. I get the right people involved. We need to fix this, right? So that's really in a nutshell. Sounds really simple, but that's the basics of my job. Is that I'm the on-site person that's got technical knowledge, technical experience to get things going quicker.
Yeah, and when you're talking about an organization that large, and integrated and
our detachment in City Red Deer is actually quite large. A lot of people drive past it downtown and don't realize that we have upwards of 300 employees that work between the police officers and the support staff doing policing for the City of Red Deer. So it is I'm not a one-man IT shop, that's for sure. There's way too much to take that credit, but it is nice for that detachment to have a resource in the building that can be called upon to help out.
So are you the only one in that building that does that role?
That's correct.
So to some extent, a one-man show.
There's
with a lot of backing support,
a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of running around. That's for sure. Yeah. There can be some crazy days.
So I think that provides some helpful background going forward as we talk through some of the issues that we got on the board here. So as we like to do, we like to kind of keep you guys up to date with what's going on at council. So again, they've had their another council meeting. They do these every second and fourth Mondays.
Correct. Yep.
And now,
unless there's a holiday like Christmas comes up,
shift it around a little bit. But now people can actually go to it.
Yes, it's exciting, and I know it seems weird, but we actually quite enjoy having people in the chambers. It adds another dimension, right? If you're just meeting there as a group, you kind of get sort of almost in a groove, and it's just not the same. But when you have somebody there, listening, and they're engaged, and you can tell that they are interested in the particular topic, it just really brings a new dynamic. So yeah, we're excited to have it.
A little bit of
again.
uncertainty. It sounds like what you're saying. You want a little bit.
Well, it's just it keeps things open then, right? Like you know that, okay, there's people watching. You need to be ready to talk, and it's not just going through the motions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes if you get into a closed group, it can almost get to be that way. Yep. Whereas if you have people there, then okay, like we need to really work through this and make sure that we're aware of them as well.
Yeah.
Well, and even when it's live streamed, I imagine you can get that feeling like it's a closed doors meeting.
It feels
you
that
get
way.
that feeling like this is just us.
Yeah.
Instead of this is a community meeting that anybody can be a part of
and be tuning into. Yeah, for sure.
So at least having some presence there, it opens it up to be, yes, this is a public.
Well, and too, it just makes you like, I think that's probably one of the challenges of being on council is that you have this mindset when I first got elected, that it's a very, watched over role. The reality of it is a lot of people don't care to get informed of what's going on until something directly affects them.
Yes.
Right. So when you see people there, it's like, oh, okay, we got people engaged. We got people. What are they excited about? Let's work through this. Let's get going on it.
We hit a nerve.
Well, yeah, but it just means we're gonna get because our council, I feel, is probably a really good council. We're very respectful, and we like to work and talk through things.
Yeah.
And we're not scared to express our own opinion if it's against somebody else's what they just said. So yeah, if we have people there that are engaged and want to bring another view to the table, great, let's hear it, right? So I think that would be great to get back into that.
And just to back up into the background, I'm curious about what prompted you to get into council, because with Yargeau, he has that kind of family background in politics and public service. His dad was a councillor, we found out. What prompted you to get
so for me it was
in the public?
I have like a civic service background, right, working in the public sector, right? So I've always had that mindset where I may not be out there enforcing the law, but I'm helping the people that do that, right? And then growing up in a small town, while there was always bingos, there was community events, you kind of get into that service type role. So when my job changed with the city of Red Deer, where I wasn't traveling all over the province, I was home more too. So then I got involved in town. I was community services advisory board, and started meeting some of the councillors. Met Mayor Julia King at that time before, and I just really kind of started getting an interest as to what runs the community, right? If you don't get involved, you always just get that tax bill every year, and that's about the only time you really think about what's going on around you.
Yeah.
But I started thinking more about it, and I thought, well, maybe I can bring something to the table and help this community grow. Because what we're talking, 2017 was the election that I was on the first time. Yeah, that was when this town really was, we had the new IGA, new commercial area going, like things are starting to get really exciting. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with the town before moving in 2004, but we've definitely grown and changed a lot. So I was interested and very excited to be a part of that.
So this last council meeting, I think there's a couple things worth highlighting to bring to your attention. Council discussed and approved, I believe, if I was watching it correctly, that there's going to be a Town of Penhold Mayor's Youth Award.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think they're still ironing out some of the details about kind of the criteria and what they're expecting.
And we kind of have a tight time frame here to get things done before May, when they want to actually issue it as well. So I think just the concept in general is there. They'll get some of the more details ironed out, but I think it's a great concept. So many things are focused on athletic ability or being a scholar. So this one's a little bit more focused on community, which makes sense that it'd be a mayor award for somebody that does have a community mind. Yeah,
community service. So so keep a lookout for that. Yeah, Penhold Youth Week is May 9th to 15th. And so I'm guessing they're trying to aim to get it out this year by then.
That's our goal.
That's the goal. Yep. So just to put that bug in the ear already, and perhaps keep in mind, or may start thinking about who you might think is worthy to be nominated for such an award. The other thing was also there's progress on a new fire hall, apparently, or at least land development. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
I don't know where the location is, and I didn't bring you on here to suss out more
no,
details.
this isn't. Yeah, there's nothing secret about it.
No, it's council.
It's on the the land plan per se. It's divisions there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing how many steps there are to this.
Yeah.
The big step to this that we were able to meet last year was to actually secure the land.
Yeah. Where? So I didn't.
So it's actually, if you look, where the reservoir is on the north side of town.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay. The new pump station.
New reservoir and that.
Yeah.
So if you look, it'd be on the east side.
Okay.
North of that is where we're looking. And the reason why we looked at that area is it is sort of close to that floodplain area, so it's not a very good area for developing for residential. A commercial area like our public works will be underwater, but it might be where the yard is and where there might be equipment or something like that you can move out easily then if there was ever a flood. So that's why it's a good location, and really the community is looking to grow that way to the north and to the east. So it's a good location for a joint fire hall and public works building.
Yeah, so it's really kind of almost a complex for the fire hall and the public works.
That's the direction we're leaning towards, because there could be some efficiencies, for costs if we can do a construction of 2 buildings at once.
Yep.
And if you have the land available, it only makes sense.
Yeah. And then kind of related to that, but it wasn't part of the council meeting. It was just released recently that Sean Pendergast is going to be the new fire chief. That was just
announced today.
Today as far as this recording goes. But yeah, so congratulations to him. And
I think
looking for
a great choice.
No, he's been here as long as I can recall.
Yeah, and he did a great job in the last little while through the pandemic and through Jim's illness as well. So I think it's a great choice.
No, I completely agree with that. I just want to mention as well, for the people living on the west side of town, council continues to be aware and deal with CN Rail. so I just I know you people out there already know this. I'm sure you've already apparently have had many conversations around it, but council continues to advocate on your behalf for the idling that goes on out there. Apparently, I think Councillor Walsh mentioned there's like, so the residents over there actually kind of keep track of the trains that come by, how long they're idling, that kind of thing. So they got stats on this. Apparently, 66 hours, I think he mentioned in February of train idle time, of idling, sitting there idling for the month of February.
That's a long time. I couldn't imagine that. I've always heard the whistles and such on the other side of 2A, but actually being over here and having that humming and the fumes for that extended period of time. Even the first few times I started talking about this months ago with some of the residents, I wasn't aware of that, and I started thinking about it, and I was just shocked.
Yeah. I like the sound of the distant train, but it's a completely different experience when you're like right on the tracks.
Yeah. The funny part is though, if you talk to the residents there, the train doesn't bother them, right? If it's going by or whatever, that they almost, it's sort of part of their experience of living in town, because
it's a shock to somebody who's not familiar, but once you get accustomed to it, a train going by is just, it's a part of life here.
And they actually enjoy seeing the train. Like they're
you
kind
bought the land knowing
they're almost like train buffs, right? When you talk to them, right? They actually enjoy seeing the cars or the locomotives. So that's not the issue that they have with it. It's the idling and the way that the rail is talking. They make it sound like this is what we've always been doing. Well, you've changed a lot, right? When you look at the way transport is going, it's increased a lot. We have a lot of trains, and I'm sure everybody in town hears the whistles. There's a lot of trains rolling through this town. So you can't say that things haven't changed. So you need to be respectful of the community that you're rolling through as well. So hopefully we can keep working through this and get to some sort of agreement for those residents to get more reasonable idle times.
Yeah.
And then finally, I want to pass on the news that the urban chicken bylaw did finally get through council this time.
We did
got
pass
through
it.
the second and third reading.
That was a long and painful process.
And that was sort of my struggle the last couple of meetings, that I just started thinking about how much, how many residents would probably sign up to get chickens in their backyard versus how much time we're spending on it. So I just thought, okay, we've done a pretty deep dive into this. How about we move forward with it and then wait a year or two and see what we have to do? Maybe then we need to relax some things because it's too much, right? But at this point, we've put so much effort into it. Let's move forward and reassess.
I guess does it get implemented right away then? Is that how it works, or is there some
it's passed? Yeah, it's third reading, so it is effectively a bylaw.
It doesn't need like Queen assent or something.
No,
like that,
it's nothing like the provincial or federal side. There's no Senate or anything like that. But I think administration probably just has to iron out a couple of things before somebody comes running in to put an application in. And there's a lot of steps anyway for people to get.
For this isn't the time of year to be starting your chicken.
Probably not.
I wouldn't suggest that.
But yeah, there's a lot of steps. I was grateful that the town adjusted that neighborhood acknowledgement form. I still think that it should have just got scrapped. And again, Walsh tried to do that in the last council meeting, but he was outvoted. You and Walsh were actually voted to get rid of it altogether. The rest
Councillor
of the
Walsh every once in a while was able to persuade me, and the conversation, I was like, okay, I see this is almost a waste of a piece of paper because it has no meat to it.
Yeah.
But I get the other councillors' view on it, that it gets that conversation between the neighbors. So hopefully we're not going to cause a fisticuffs between people that don't get along. But I'm hoping that the intent here is that if you have that conversation, it's not a shock to the neighbor. They know, okay, when they see the chickens coming in, oh yeah,
what's that sound?
They already told me about this, and I'm aware of it. I didn't necessarily like it or agree to it, but I'm aware of it. So
no, well, we got other councillors planned to come on, so we'll ask them what their thoughts were on that. But yeah, so now urban chickens are going to be permitted in your backyard, provided that you fulfill all the different requirements for that. But it's no longer going to be a topic ever, right? Who knows?
I hope for not a year. How about that?
Yeah, okay.
Let's just give it a year shelf life, and then maybe we can investigate it again.
2 times in the last 6 months is probably good now.
I think we're good for a little break.
We'll see if anybody even bothers to get chickens.
Well,
like I know we mentioned on a previous one that Innisfail only has one.
Yeah.
They have one person with chickens in the entire town.
And their town is 3 times our size.
So yeah, it's entirely possible that the interest isn't as high as the topic implied.
Yeah, we had a lot of people go through and reply to our survey, and I think a lot of people like the concept in their mind, but if they start thinking about it, they probably realize, oh my goodness, I want to go to Mexico on vacation. What do I do with 4 chickens suddenly when I'm away? Right? It's not so simple as dropping them off with your parents or dropping them off at a kennel. There's a lot more commitment to this, right? So it's an option there, and if that's something you think will be great to teach your kids, or to potentially have a more healthy, natural lifestyle, or there's a whole variety of reasons for it. If that works for you, fantastic. Here's an option for you.
Yep.
Was your farm upbringing give you a little bit of sympathy towards that side?
We had a garden, of course, growing up, so that was the big thing: canning and gardening. So I understand that concept of being, it's a healthier, it's cheaper, especially when you're dealing with produce and that. So I respect people if they want to do that. Then I think it's great that they have an opportunity or an option to do it.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, I think it's just worth touching on Ukraine again. Unfortunately, the Russian invasion continues over there. News continues to break. So anything we talk now, by the time this gets released, it's
totally different.
Past news, so we continue to keep them in our thoughts and prayers as they go through just the incredible upheaval. It's just hard to think that some of these buildings and these lives that were just going about their day by day life a week ago, and they're bombed out, or they're fleeing their country. It just seems so almost so pointless in that way. Like what's going to be accomplished out of this? But it's just a sense of fragility of how the mundane everyday things that we just take for granted, like just flip in a switch, or on flip. What's the analogy? Flip on a dime, I think that's the analogy.
Sounds about
something
right.
Something like that.
One of the articles I was reading, this describes sort of like this. Imagine, one day your kids are in school, you're shopping at the store, you're preparing for your day to day, and then the next day, you're grabbing your kids, you're running to a train. You may not get on the train, trying to get to another city away, and maybe get to another country. So it just, we just have to remember how blessed we are to be where we're at, and that our problems in comparison are really nothing.
It helps provide a little bit of perspective. on our own blessed existence over here in Canada. One element though I do want to bring up is some of so there's lots of sanctions going on and economic sanctions. I think that's good. I think we need to keep providing financial and military aid. Throwing in troops, I think, is another step beyond where I would go with it. But yes, providing them with kind of the lethal weapons and ammunitions that we're doing, I think, from my perspective, I think that's what needs to happen. But there's also a lot of what I call unserious reactions going on, like kind of these knee-jerk reactions. And so, just as an example, it seems like everything Russian now is like untouchable. So here's a list of things that have been kind of banned. So a number of Canadian cities have severed ties with their sister cities. So like Lacombe, I think, has a sister city over in Japan, if I remember on their sign. But anyways,
that sounds familiar.
So you just have some sort of mutual connection.
It's a common thing. They'll often send like some gift back and forth and have
like
some kind of communication throughout the years.
Exchange students as well.
Yeah, something like that. So there's a number of cities breaking those ties. There's a device that camera crews use to mount cameras on cars for those tracking shots and for movies, and that arm, that device they use is called a Russian arm, and so the company that makes that rig is rebranding this Russian arm.
Oh wow!
Yes, EA Sports.
Yeah, I heard that.
EA
FIFA.
Sports. So they make video games, usually of sporting. So they're well known for making NHL, particular FIFA, for Xboxes and PS4 or PlayStations. They're pulling their Russian teams off of those.
Wow.
Yes. It keeps going. There's a Quebec diner that's pulled their poutine off of the menu because in French it's spelled the same as Vladimir Putin's last name.
I didn't even know that.
The World Curling Federation is banning Russians from the upcoming tournament in Prince George. The internet. Okay, so here, I'll save this one for last. But there's the Paralympics are about to start on March 4th. So I think the day after this releases. But it was just the other day, March 2nd, that the International Olympic Committee banned Russian and Belarusian Paralympics from participating altogether. And that was partly, they initially were going to let them compete, but just under kind of a neutral flag. But there was actually so much pushback for that. And other athletes saying, I don't really want to play against a Russian athlete, that it forced their arm to say, okay, well, what are we getting ourselves in for if we allow these athletes to compete? Are we even going to be able to play these games that we got scheduled?
Oh,
because you're just going to make just a disaster for scheduling and just whether or not you can actually finish a whole schedule or whole games. If
you're missing all these athletes,
just forget, or if you're not willing to compete against certain teams, and so they just banned them outright. And that goes for the Russian and Belarusian teams, for the Canadian junior, for the Canadian juniors. Actually, I don't know if they've been banned yet. Maybe they have. I'll have to double check. But Russian and Belarusian teenagers can no longer be drafted by Canadian Hockey League, Canadian Junior Hockey League. So like your WHL, your OHL, they can't draft Russian or Belarusian teenagers at the moment. And finally, and I saved this one, the International Cat Federation has enacted a competition.
There was such a thing.
There is. And they've enacted a competition ban on Russian cats. This is what I mean by this unseriousness of this. I don't get it. The sanctions I get, because at least they seem to be targeted towards the people who are most influential in kind of what's going on over in Ukraine.
Yeah, you ban Russia from access to the SWIFT international banking system, and you obviously are going to have a serious impact on their ability to finance the war.
Yeah, and there's already
there's a logic to that.
There's business people over there, oligarchs that are already being greatly affected by this, right? So it makes sense. It's a good measure to take.
But banning teenagers from competing in hockey or banning paraplegics from competing in the Paralympics because of their nationality, they're not soldiers.
And yeah, it is like there's nothing going on here. It's like, oh yeah, Putin, once he finds out that Russian cats are banned from competition in international cat federations, like,
He'll
oh yes,
walk back.
yeah, oh okay, that was too far. I can't put up with that anymore. Like, and
maybe he has a star cat that
maybe he's
he
a cat
wants.
person.
Maybe
He's a cat
you
person.
never know.
That's right. They can be quite defensive about that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. but yeah, I wonder what kind of atmosphere that's creating or view of just Russian people in general. Because it's interesting kind of comparing this to how the coronavirus came and how, say, people like Donald Trump would call this the China virus, and the media would get all up in arms saying what you're doing is stirring up racist language. Asians are going to come under threat. And yet it just seems like it's just such a blanket ban on anything touching Russia. I'm concerned about, that kind of actual sentimentality kind of seeping into the culture.
Yeah, and we have seen a little bit of that already. There have been attacks on like Russian restaurants and Russian themed businesses of some form in North America that have no direct ties to Russia. It's somebody who came from that culture years ago and runs a restaurant here.
It's unfortunate. It's you would think in our era in 2022 that we wouldn't be stooped to that level, right? When you think back and, in school when you were learning about history, right? We've seen it countless times where, the Germans back in the day were just because they happened to be living in North America, they must be affiliated with the Nazis.
Yeah, the Japanese as well.
And the Japanese, well, did you ever think maybe they moved here to get away from that lifestyle and they have no ties and no interest in that lifestyle? So it is unfortunate to see that. And yeah, I don't see how. I wasn't aware of all that, but
I know, right?
And I just don't see either but maybe I guess on the other side, I'll be the devil's advocate. Maybe these people, that's their way of trying to show that, okay, Putin, I don't support your attack on Ukraine.
Yeah.
And this is the only way I can do it in my sphere of influence. So this is what I'm going to do. And I guess there's some, I don't know, spiritual benefit to it or something along those lines.
I think that's probably what's driving it. It's though to me it's such a juvenile, shallow approach to it, and it really doesn't actually impact the people who are involved in going on. It's casting all Russians as equally responsible for what's going on.
And
there's just no way that makes sense.
And we'll never know, right? The way that Putin is controlling the media over there is what are the locals, right? How do they feel about this? How much support does he have?
We do know that their prisons are overflowing with protesters who have been arrested. We've been seeing reports of that even in the major cities over there in Russia, people are protesting. So there's a lot of people that they know enough to know they don't agree.
Yeah, that this isn't going to be good for their country.
Yeah.
And just kind of fun little fun. What am I saying? Just as a kind of interesting historical parallel to what we're seeing now. The same kind of thing happened during World War I, where a lot of things were renamed that had kind of a German naming or perspective on it, including a number of Alberta towns, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so
I didn't know this either.
So there used to be a name or a German or a town called Bingen, Bingen. How would you? Bingen.
Just Bingen.
It doesn't sound like a German name, but apparently had German
heritage
to it. Yeah, so it's actually named after a town in Germany. It's now Nemescam. So that was changed in 1960.
Sounds like a native name.
Yeah.
Where is that?
This is near Foremost. So this is down in kind of the south.
Southern
southeast,
Alberta.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Never even heard of it.
Yeah, so some of these are smaller ones. There used to be a Karlstadt.
Yeah.
That's
very
now
German.
Alderson. There used to be a Dusseldorf near Barhead. That
Actually, there was a car named after that too, wasn't there? In Dusseldorf.
Dusseldorf.
Sounds like, I think I've seen it at the
I'll
Reynolds
trust
Museum.
you. I'm not a car guy. My dad is. I never adopted the car gene. But that got renamed Freedom in 1919. I don't know if this one's connected to it. Just throw it in here. Delburn used to be known as Gates Valley. It was named after Leonard Gates, and who had
Really?
yeah. So
Interesting history that I did not know.
That was in 1912. So I don't. It seems a little bit before World War One. So
Yeah.
but anyways, there was another one here I wanted to get to. Oh, there was a Vise. I'm gonna say it's Viseville. W. It's got to be a V, right?
V. Yep.
Yeah. Viseville is now known as Aspen Beach.
Oh,
Really?
1916. And Wittenberg was changed to Leadale in 1917. I'm not sure the actual location of that one. And there's actually a CPR, so a Canadian Pacific Canadian Pacific Railway station that was had the name of Swastika.
Oh, wow.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. There's also apparently a name of a subdivision in Medicine Hat in 1912.
No way.
Apparently.
Now, granted, there is a large German history there, I guess.
So that was in 1911. So obviously, so we talked about the swastika a little bit last time, but yeah, how that term, that imagery has shifted over time. It's now known as Gayford, at least the CPR station, and that area is now known as Gayford. That was changed during World War II. So yeah, so it's some of even just the Alberta landscape has shifted due to some of these.
And
these
some of
processes.
those, like saying the swastika one, that's a pretty legitimate.
I think that was a good
to be a
choice.
little bit concerned about. The other ones, a lot of them you're talking about changing just because of the German connection. And so that's kind of what we were talking about with this Russian stuff. You start to give that cultural sentiment that all things Russian, or in that case, all things German, are a little untouchable. You don't really want to be in that territory. So let's change it and get away from it.
And I find it interesting how we are in this society where we feel that we need to do that, right? And I don't know, there's a quote somewhere, I don't know who said it, but those that are erase history or will forget history are doomed to repeat it, right? And I think that's where the actual remembrance of the Holocaust. It's important to remember that. It's a very heinous time in our humanity, and as long as you don't forget it, hopefully you'll never do that again, right? You'll never repeat it.
Hopefully.
And that's the real irony of Ukraine, that Putin is saying that he's fighting Nazism, but he actually hit one of the Holocaust memorials there, right? So it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's it's just a hard time, or hard to process his thinking why he's gone into it. And I'll just throw in this one last one. Again, I'm not exactly sure if this is connected to World War I, but there used to be an Eidsvold post office in 1911 east of Bashaw. It's now Donalda.
Donalda. Okay, I did not know that it had that name before.
Yeah, Eidsvold apparently. So yeah, it's as always trying to tie it back into a little bit of Alberta here. Even just the whole landscape of Alberta has kind of been affected by some of these reactions to kind of disassociate from these regimes, and sometimes I just question how far we are. Are we? It just seems more reactionary than kind of thoughtful in our reactions, and then. I think we need to be careful about that, because often those kind of immediate reactions might produce consequences that we didn't really intend, even though our intentions were good at the beginning. All right, so let's then wrap up here in Alberta, since we moved back here, talking about Alberta place names. In 2020, so just kind of set up this, in 2020, just after the UCP was elected here in Alberta, they set up a fair deal panel.
Right.
And so the goal here was to kind of, I have issues with the whole idea of using this word fair. It just seems so broad and ambiguous. But anyways, beyond that, the idea was here to kind of address grievances that Alberta had with basically the federal government and the feeling that we are getting the short shrift again,
Right.
on a number of different issues. And so it came back with a number of different recommendations. In fact, one of them we just addressed in this last election with the referendum on the equalization question.
Correct.
So that was born out of the report that came from this fair deal panel.
Ambiguous wording in that question, I thought, but
yeah. I think we had like 2 or
spent a bit
3
of time
episodes
on that.
Yeah.
And then on daylight savings. But anyways, that whole thing I just didn't understand when they should have put our next topic on there, asking if people wanted to stay with the RCMP. I think that'd have been a good question.
Okay, that's interesting. It's worth talking about because another recommendation was to produce or create an Alberta provincial police service. So basically replace the RCMP altogether here in Alberta. So more like you would see with Ontario, with the Ontario Provincial Police, the OPP. And so I think it was just this last year they released kind of their preliminary report on what that transition would look like and what kind of steps would be entailed and some of the money figures going on to it. Now, I know, since you have kind of that connection with the RCMP, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this topic. How have you engaged with it personally? And I think has council also?
Council is definitely reading into it, researching, trying to be informed about it as much as possible. And really at our table, at our level, the biggest thing is that we don't have a detachment here. So, policing isn't a direct connection for us, but we see costs, right? Like in the last few years, we've seen that new policing requisition come into effect.
Yeah. So that's different than the Alberta Provincial Police Service.
Yeah. So that whole initiative was to get funds to increase the number of police officers in Alberta to improve rural crime was the whole initiative there. But in order to fund it, we need to get municipalities that weren't paying to start paying. So that's, towns under 5,000 and your counties started putting money into it. So that's really our council. I think that's the big thing we're seeing is that, in this initiative, they're very clear and admitting that if we go away from the RCMP contract in the province of Alberta, we're basically telling the federal government, you know what, keep the money you're giving us for RCMP policing, which is $185 million.
Yeah. So the federal covers about 30%.
About 30% of policing in Alberta. And you can keep that money and we're going to make up that difference and do our own police force. And that's where I struggle a lot. And that's where I'd say most municipal elected officials across Alberta that have RCMP, they struggle going, where are we making up the difference here?
Yeah. And so, so there's a number, I think a few different kind of angles on this that the fair deal perspective, at least coming out of that, it seemed like this was prompted first and foremost with the idea of trying to get more control in-house, as it were, or in the province and away from the federal government. And
I see that too. Working in the environment, there are, challenges where you see policies or things that are in place that are federally controlled because they are a national police force. But again, I look at that and wonder, if you're looking to have, direct control in the province, well, you're still gonna have a police commission, right? You don't want to have politicians controlling the police, right? Like, to me, I think that's a dangerous concept, right? And that if you look at the world that has, Edmonton Police Service, Calgary Police Service, well, they have a commission. They're not run by the mayor and by the council in those cities, right? They are separate. So if we're going to go down this route, we better be understanding that just because we have Alberta Provincial Police Force doesn't mean we suddenly have more control over policing. Do we have more say and more input? For sure. But why can't we have commissions or more levels of representation in the existing RCMP? So right?
So that was when I was looking through this. The argument was that if we put it on a local level, we can create a more integrated approach with a number of different provincial services. It seemed like the argument was being made that because this is the RCMP is kind of instituted and governed, at least to a certain degree, at federal level, this means that these federal policies then have to be kind of pigeonholed, or at least kind of integrated in some way with the provincial systems. So I forget which exactly which kind of systems they're talking about, but is just the ability to integrate a federal and a provincial systems together. There seemed to be a problem with that. How much, as far as you know, how much flexibility does the province have over how the RCMP is kind of run here?
They do provide input into, policing objectives, right? So there's annual and 3-year plans where, even...
This is from the province.
From the province. Yeah. And then, if you look at, say, Innisfil RCMP, well, they also look for feedback from the municipalities that they police to say, okay, what do you see as trends in your community, or what do you think is important for us to focus on in policing in general, right? Mm-hmm. They try to be a little broad level. They don't want necessarily, just street specifically in town or anything like that, but this initiatives at that. But some of the things I think they're referring to as well is, things like integrating with, mental health nurses.
Yes, yes.
So they call that the Police and Crisis Team Pact, which I thought was very interesting because it exists already at a certain level. So City of Red Deer RCMP has 2 PACT nurses that are paired up with 2 police officers, mm-hmm. and they specialize in working with the mental health and drug addiction calls in the City of Red Deer. So it's happening already, right? It exists, but the way they try to make it sound like this is a new idea, a new concept that's going to be with the Alberta Provincial Police. Well, no, it's not a new concept. And that's where my whole point with this is I definitely see value in some of the ideas they're coming up with.
Yeah.
Why don't you look at trying to implement them in the RCMP?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the main arguments that the National Police Federation is making. They're kind of the union over the RCMP officers, and they're going through Alberta and the different municipalities and kind of making their case for why the RCMP should be staying.
Well, just making sure everyone's informed, right? I find a lot of people, and it's not just policing; it's a lot of services in general. They don't see that they're really a business. Mm-hmm. There's a monetary cost to running them. Yeah. Decisions are made quite often for financial reasons, not necessarily for operational or for sometimes best outcomes. Yeah. I'm not saying the RCMP is not doing good outcomes, but I'm saying in general, right? We forget that when the money or when the rubber hits the road, it's money that's behind a lot of challenges that these services have. Yep. So the other, buzzword that they had in their presentation was hubs, they called them. So these specialized hubs are going to be around the province that will have support services like major case and forensics and all this sort of stuff. Yep. Well, the RCMP, they used to be called subdivision buildings, and a lot of them got shut down because to save money, you centralize them more in the larger centers.
Okay, yeah.
So are you saying then you're willing to spend more money?
Yeah.
So not only would we be giving up the money that the federal government is giving us, we're looking at doing things that potentially increase the cost alone, and then we're out even more.
That's the way I look at it, let alone the transition costs. Right?
Yes.
You're having to buy out leases or pay out the vehicles or create a new computer system for files. Like the list goes on and on of all these things that you're going to need to basically create on your own, right? Like because you're telling the RCMP, please leave, and we're not going to take over it. Yeah. Right? And if you want to see how that unfolds, look at Surrey, BC. And that's by far the largest, it is the largest RCMP contract in all of Canada. They're basically the size of, one of the districts in Alberta for RCMP policing. So it's huge. And I don't know, maybe they'll succeed in the end, but they're meeting a lot of hurdles in their transition to do that.
Yeah, so Surrey, BC is switching to creating their own municipal police force down there.
Exactly.
And so, I think I've seen some stats where like the initial transition costs were 17 million and now they're like 80 million or something like that.
So is that going to happen here with ours? Cost of 300 million? Is that going to turn into a couple billion maybe?
And especially that's the thing about the government. Government projections like this, like they're always going to increase. They start. So the cost they're costing it about the same. They're about 750 million. For the RCMP model and the 2 proposed Alberta provincial police models. It'd be about annual 750. Now the key obviously is with the RCMP, we're getting 30% support for that 750 from the Fed. So we wouldn't get that. And then, you have at least 360 million in transition costs on top of that annual $700 million or $750 million annual cost
operating
of running.
cost.
Now, so there's certainly a lot of money going around there. Now, I've read the kind of the Surrey study or the Surrey perspective. Red Deer looked into transitioning. They backed out on that.
Well, and the funny part is too, they're relatively close. Unless you look, there was two. I think each of the terms they did it, and having worked in the environment, I kind of just shook my head, going, "Why are we doing this exercise? You just did this a few years ago. Why are you spending money on another study to tell you the same thing that if you want to do this, it's going to cost you a lot of money?"
Yeah,
and I don't know where in Canada right now that we're flush with money.
Yeah.
So if we're trying to be more cost effective, maybe stick with what you got and work with it, right? Make improvements, see what you can do to get synergies, right?
So Red Deer backed out on perhaps going to a municipal. Does Lacombe still have their own police?
Yeah, Lacombe
has
still has their own police service.
And then Ontario has it. I don't know how long they've had it, but Quebec has had theirs. Apparently Newfoundland and Labrador have.
There's portions of it that they have the constabulary, they call it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not like this is an unachievable pipe dream.
No.
So yes. So depending on what side you're reading on, I think somewhere in the middle is kind of the reality of the situation.
Well, and the funny part is, I have a stack of papers in front of me where I went to a provincial engagement session, they called it, and they had all of these headlines printed off of all these different places in the country that are currently looking at reviewing what they're doing, and then they even touched on a really weird concept where they're saying systemic racism in policing in Canada. Well, if it's systemic in policing, then is it just the RCMP that's the problem?
Yeah,
is that your veiled? I don't know. I just found the whole, as you probably can pick up, I just found the whole seminar kind of frustrating because they worded it as an engagement session, but it was more of a lecture. Where they were just giving us the background as to what they're thinking and what their plan is. Which, like I say, I look at it and even like if you look at the number of police officers that they're forecasting for Alberta Provincial Police Force, it's only, I think, not even 100 more.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
So are you saying then that the RCMP model works?
That's right? It. Yeah. For me, I'm seeing it from two perspectives. I think you can make kind of the feasibility practicality kind of argument. This is where you look at the money, dollars and cents, and whether or not we're getting any kind of improvement in service over this. And there, for me, it doesn't. I'm not convinced.
No.
The other perspective, though, and this is kind of where the fair deal comes back in. And at least at the time, the Minister of Justice here, Mandu, he says, he's quoted in an article that we do have a responsibility beyond the monetary implications to defend and pursue our province's best interests. And so this kind of goes to the question of whether or not we should do this on some sort of principle basis of moving towards autonomy or independence from the federal government.
And to me, that's the only argument for it.
Yeah, and still, I question it because it was just that beginning or just near the end of last year that we just signed another huge $1 billion deal for like daycare funding. So do you want to get rid of the feds or do you want or you want to keep them? Like you're sending mixed messages here with this. Well, and I question your sincerity in trying to gain control.
And I might be a little bit more on board with it if I felt that, our ambulance response and our AHS hospital system was running well. I might be a little bit more going, oh, okay, we're doing things well in this province. Let's take on something else. I'm not feeling that way. I'm thinking, let's leave the RCMP alone, maybe do some, improvements here and there, but let's focus on things that we have challenges with right now, which is our healthcare system, ambulance response. I don't know if you've probably touched on that a little bit. It's scary, the response times and where ambulances are going and how many are not operating for hours at a time, let alone our emergency centers being shut down for hours at a time and all doctors available. So that's where I look at it too and go, really? You really feel confident that you can create a provincial police force and do a great job at it? I really struggle.
Yes, no, I think I'm on the same board, on the same page on that. It's just the timing of it. I think there's just so many other issues to deal with before you try to institute a whole create a whole police force for a province, like that is just a huge undertaking.
And one of my favorite parts of it is the recruitment. They have this,
I know, right?
They have this vision that they're going to create their own. Well, no, that I guess. And when I was at the engagement session, they're not immediately creating their own training center. They're going to use the capacity at Edmonton and Calgary Police Service to get 3,000. Well, okay, I guess maybe you'll get some RCMP officers.
I think
transition over
15%. They're thinking
that's their, and I'm glad they're being conservative on that, because the reality of it, like, you're not going to get that many unless you're very lucrative with the wage. And let's be reality, we're not going to have a lot of money to give them lucrative wages. So how much of that you're going to get? But where are you training them? How are you getting them? And then they always paint. Right now, when you talk to them, they paint this picture that, oh, well, we're going to recruit local people that want to, become a police officer for the town of Penhold. And then they're going to work their entire, 30-year career as a police officer in the town of Penhold.
Yeah.
In some respects, I see that as being like a nice picture and idyllic. But then the other side, you kind of go, but where's their opportunity? Right? Like, it's the town of Penhold Police. You're not going to have the opportunity to get into specialized investigations, or like, it's 30 years of policing a small town. Like, that's where the benefit of the RCMP, people will do that for 5 to 10 years, and then they'll go to a large center and get into homicide, or get into tech crimes, or get into other things, and they have a nice rounded career, and that's what entices them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. It's
and I don't know. And I'm old school in that thinking, if you're stuck in the same area for too long, you're either going to get jaded, or you're going to get biased, or you're just going to get rusty per se, right?
Yeah.
And that's the whole RCMP mindset, is that generally about 5 years ish. Yeah. They want to move you somewhere else. That way you're not going to be complacent is the key word.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You're more engaged. Yeah. In a new environment. Now I got to kind of learn this area now. So yeah, there's always that constant involvement when you're shifting around. Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a kind of a pipe dream scenario there, where you just have, I remember reading that, where they imagine kind of local Albertan boys and girls kind of becoming part of this Alberta police force, and just, this is their dream. And so they're more involved in the community, and I guess they'll do better police work.
I just had visions of like the Texas Lone Ranger, pop up in my head, and it's like, well, it's maybe a little too fairy tale for my mind, but.
And just as a parting note, though, we have had an Alberta police force before.
We did.
So that was from 1917 to 1932. We had a police force here, and it was actually born out of prohibition laws. The Alberta Institute Prohibition. This was during 1917. The RCMP was already kind of struggling for staff because of the World War I. And they weren't really that excited about having to enforce prohibition laws, especially when Montana to our south was still wet at the time. And so you had rum runners running up and down the border. And it's like, yeah, we're good with that. And so Alberta's like, okay, we'll take over this. And kind of interesting, one of the main reasons they went back to the RCMP in 32 was it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah, the federal government gave an incentive for the province to switch over to policing.
Yeah, it was a huge cost savings.
So the province at that time, or the government at that time, said, "Oh, let's save some money and go with this." And here we are in 2022. Now we don't want your money. We're going to create our own police force. So it's just an interesting.
Yeah, but this is and it's kind of interesting though. The Alberta Police Force was actually apparently very well regarded at the time. So that was again kind of there's a monetary argument for changing over to RCMP, but I think a lot of people were sad to see this kind of homegrown Alberta police force leave as well.
The pride of the local police.
There's something about that can't be disregarded, though I question the sincerity of the move now, and certainly the monetary requirements behind it.
It's hard to ignore the fiscal irresponsibility.
Yeah, still a lot of unknowns.
And don't forget too, it is very clear that we're on a provincial policing agreement federally that expires in 2032.
Yes.
So when it gets renegotiated, maybe we won't get those same amount of funds, right? Maybe the federal government at that time will say, "Oh wow, our Treasury board is a little tight on funds right now too.
Yep.
Let's push this down to the provincial level, and then maybe we should be prepared for that at that time, that we need to be looking at this." But I just don't see it now.
Yeah. So 10 years down the road, the province's contract with the RCMP has to be renewed in some way. And so, whether that 70-30 split changes or not, we'll have to wait and see. And then, yeah, who knows how things will change in 10 years. Maybe we'll be having a different conversation about
and maybe
things.
we'll, our economy in a much different place, and the provincial government will have a revenue that will actually be sustainable to do this, to investigate it. I just don't see it now.
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps up enough for today. If you stuck around this long, we appreciate your attention, for keeping us in your ear this long, or in front of your screen. We appreciate your attendance. We thank you, Councillor Muller, for having us on, or for coming on, I should say.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we had a great conversation. Hopefully,
it was good.
We got to know you a little more and got your perspective on some important elements. We look forward to a lot more conversations with you and the other councillors in the very near future, hopefully. But until then, my name is Brian Constantine.
I'm Michael Rowland.
And this has been Penhold Talk Radio.